I invited my son and his wife for Christmas dinner. I surprised him with a BMW and gave her a designer purse. Then my son smirked and said, "Mom, my wife told me to teach you a lesson. No gifts for you." My daughter-in-law just sat there, smiling while I was embarrassed. As I deliberately drew out the envelope, a quiet resolve settled over me. "And now I have one more gift," I stated, my gaze sweeping over them. The moment Eddie's fingers touched it, his hands began to tremble. It was Christmas Eve in my Florida home. I had just presented my son Eddie with a BMW and his wife Maureen with a designer purse. In return I waited. I longed for anything that would signal I still mattered to them. Instead, Eddie offered a dismissive smirk and a casual, "Mom, thanks for everything." Then Maureen, with a chilling smugness, declared, "It's time you learned a lesson. So no gifts for you." She reclined, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips, utterly oblivious that I had arrived armed with a lesson of my own. My name is Ruth Dawson. I'm 73 years old. If you had told me last Christmas that I'd be spending this one alone in my Naples home, with no plans beyond sharing my story with strangers who grasp betrayal better than my own flesh and blood, I would have laughed. Yet here I am. And you know what? I'm at peace. Some lessons demand everything to learn, but they return something far more precious than any ribbon-wrapped present: your true self. Before I delve into what unfolded that night, I'm curious, where are you right now? Are you nestled in your living room wrapping presents? Perhaps you're scrolling late in bed, unable to sleep. Or maybe, like me, you're observing the holidays quietly, contemplating those who shattered your trust. Wherever you are, tell me in the comments. I've learned that genuine understanding often comes not from those who share your surname, but from internet strangers who've navigated similar heartbreaks. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've given everything only to receive cruelty, then stay with me. The air in the house was fragrant with roasted turkey and cinnamon. My Christmas tree stood tall, adorned with ornaments my late husband Ray and I had collected over 4 decades of marriage. Its soft, blinking lights cast a warm glow. I had spent 3 days preparing for this evening, scrubbing already clean floors, polishing silver that rarely saw the light of day. I even made a second trip to the grocery store for the cranberry sauce Eddie loved as a child. I wanted perfection. When Eddie and Maureen arrived, I embraced my son tightly at the door. For a fleeting moment, I felt like I had him back. He smelled of Ray's cologne. His arms felt strong and safe. But the instant Maureen stepped inside, her eyes began scrutinizing my home, like she was conducting an inventory, not admiring but assessing. Dinner passed in quiet tension. Eddie discussed work and I asked questions. Maureen, meanwhile, scrolled through her phone, barely touching the meal I'd labored over. I noticed a new bracelet on her wrist, undeniably expensive, far exceeding what her boutique job could afford. But I remained silent. Mothers learn to suppress questions when they suspect the answers will sting. After dinner, we moved to the living room for gifts. I handed Eddie a small box first. Inside were the keys to a used BMW I'd been saving for months. Not out of obligation, not for approval, but because a mother's love, even when bruised, doesn't vanish. When he opened it, his face went blank, then filled with disbelief. "Mom," he whispered, "a BMW? You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I replied softly. He hugged me, a genuine embrace, reminding me of the boy he was before marriage changed him. Then I handed Maureen her gift, a designer handbag. She opened it, glanced briefly, muttered, "Cute," and tossed it onto the couch like a dish towel. No thanks, no appreciation, just casual dismissal. I clasped my hands in my lap and waited. It was my turn. Despite the growing coldness between us, despite everything, I still harbored hope. I still believed that perhaps, just perhaps, they had thought of me too. Eddie cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "Mom," he began slowly, "we didn't get you anything this year." The words hung heavy. I blinked, telling myself I'd misheard, but he continued. "Maureen said you need to learn to give without expecting anything back." He attempted a laugh, as if humiliating your mother on Christmas Eve was a light-hearted joke. Maureen leaned back, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, but triumphant. The room suddenly felt constricted. The tree lights seemed too bright. The warmth I'd painstakingly created now felt hollow. I could have cried. A part of me yearned to, but I didn't. Because deep within me, beneath the shock and the pain, something else stirred: clarity. I reached into the drawer beside my chair. My hand was steady. My voice did not waver. "Well," I said quietly, "if tonight is about lessons, then allow me to teach you something." I pulled out a large, heavy, sealed envelope and placed it on the coffee table between us. Eddie looked confused. Maureen's smile faltered slightly. "Go on," I urged. "Open it." They had no idea this night would never unfold as they expected. To truly grasp that Christmas Eve, one must rewind to when things began to unravel, back to September when I first sensed a profound shift. It began with silence. Eddie used to call me 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Quick check-ins while driving to work or making coffee. Nothing profound, just a son letting his mother know she was on his mind. Hey mom. Just calling to say hi. How's the garden? Did you see that storm coming? Lock up the shutters. Love you mom. Talk soon. Small, ordinary gestures, the kind you only truly appreciate when they cease. In September those calls dwindled. A week would pass, then two, then nearly a month slipped by without a word. I rationalized it. Newlyweds needed time to build their life that was natural, healthy. But mothers possess an instinct, sensing distance like an approaching storm. A shift in the air, a tightening in the chest. One morning I entered my kitchen and saw the basket of oranges on the counter. I'd bought them 4 days earlier because Eddie always loved fresh squeezed juice. As a boy, he'd stand beside me as I cut them, awaiting his glass like liquid gold. Now those oranges sat untouched. I realized the only reason I still bought them was for a son who no longer visited. I threw them all away that afternoon. The house felt different after Ray died. Larger, quieter. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you switch on the television just to hear a human voice. Ray had been gone 2 years by then. 2 years of waking to an empty bed, 2 years of cooking for one, 2 years of realizing the life you built with someone doesn't disappear with them. It merely continues, and now you navigate it alone. Eddie had been my anchor. He called daily in those first months after we buried his father. He checked on me, ensured I ate, sat with me on the porch, and let me cry without trying to fix it. But marriage changed him. Or perhaps it was Maureen. Initially, I tried to be understanding. She was young, adjusting. Becoming part of a new family isn't easy. But the signs were subtle at first, easy to dismiss if you chose self-deception. Like the time Eddie mentioned coming for Sunday dinner, then canceled an hour before. Maureen has plans, he said, as if her plans automatically superseded his without question. Or when I invited them to a small gathering at my friend Janice's house. Eddie agreed, but the morning of, Maureen texted me directly, "We won't be able to make it. Eddie needs rest." Not "we decided," not "sorry something came up," just a statement as if she now held the authority to speak for him. I stared at that text for a long time. I wanted to call him to ask if he even knew she'd canceled on his behalf. But I didn't, fearing the answer. Mothers are taught patience, to give space, to trust love will guide their children back when they're ready. But they don't tell you that sometimes space becomes distance and distance becomes abandonment. Suddenly, you're in your kitchen, discarding oranges because the person you bought them for doesn't even remember you exist. By late September, I hadn't seen Eddie in nearly 6 weeks. I tried texting him casual updates, nothing desperate. "Hope works good. Let me know if you want dinner. So your favorite show's back on. Made me think of you. Miss you, sweetheart." He'd reply hours later, sometimes the next day, "Busy? We'll let you know. Thanks mom. You too." Short, detached, as if I were a distant acquaintance. One evening, on my back porch, watching the sunset over the neighbor's roof, I contemplated calling Eddie, a real call, not a text. But then I considered what I'd say. "Why don't you call me anymore? Did I do something wrong? Do you still love me?" It sounded pathetic, a mother begging her grown son for attention. So I didn't call. I just sat, watching the sky paint itself pink and orange, feeling the profound weight of loneliness settle deeper into my bones. The next morning my phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. For a second my heart lifted. Perhaps he was thinking of me, wanted to visit. I opened it. "Hey mom. Maureen and I might stop by this weekend if we have time. She wants to talk to you about something. Not, I want to see you. Not, I miss you. If we have time," as if I were an errand to tick off between grocery shopping and laundry. And the second part. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and stared. Something inside me knew. Not the specifics, not the full picture, but enough. Enough to realize the son I raised, the boy who hugged me goodnight and called me the best mom, was slipping away. And the woman he married was holding the door open. They arrived that Saturday. I'd spent the morning cleaning an already spotless house, vacuuming the living room twice, changing bathroom hand towels, arranging fresh flowers on the dining table. Old habits, the things mothers do to make their children feel welcome. I cooked Eddie's favorite meal, roast chicken with garlic mashed potatoes and cornbread, the same dinner I made every Sunday growing up, the same dinner Ray would sit down to after a long day, loosening his tie, saying, "Ruth, you outdid yourself again." I wanted Eddie to walk in and smell home. I wanted him to remember what it felt like to be loved unconditionally. When they arrived, Eddie gave me a quick, polite hug. The kind you give someone you're obligated to see, not someone you miss. Maureen followed, wearing sunglasses indoors, which she slid onto her head, her gaze sweeping my home like she was inspecting a hotel room she wasn't sure she wanted to stay in. "Smells good," Eddie said, attempting cheerfulness. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied. "Go ahead and sit. Dinner's almost ready." Maureen walked slowly through the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She paused by the bookshelf, running a finger along the edge as if checking for dust. Then she turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You know, Ruth," she said casually, "this house is really big for one person." I was pulling the chicken from the oven. I paused, oven mitt still on. "It's the house Ray and I built together," I said quietly. "It holds a lot of memories." She shrugged, examining her nails. Sure, but practically speaking it's a lot to maintain. You'd probably be happier somewhere smaller, less work, less stress. Eddie stood by the dining table looking uncomfortable. He said nothing, just shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. I slowly set the roasting pan down and removed my mitts. I like my home, I stated, keeping my voice calm. I'm not ready to leave it. Morin offered that same tight smile. Of course, just something to think about. But it wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement, a planted seed. We sat down to eat. I served everyone as always. Eddie devoured his food with genuine appreciation. For a few minutes he seemed like my son again, relaxed, present. This is amazing, Mom, he said between bites. I forgot how good your cornbread is. My heart swelled slightly. I'm glad you like it, honey. Morin merely picked at her plate, taking a few small bites before setting down her fork and pulling out her phone. I watched her scroll as Eddie and I chatted. She wasn't even pretending to be engaged. Her thumbs flew across the screen, her face illuminated by the blue glow. That's when I noticed it, the bracelet on her wrist. Delicate, with small stones that caught the light, it looked expensive, not something you'd buy at a department store. I recalled Eddie mentioning months ago that Morin worked part-time at a downtown boutique, an entry-level sales assistant, perhaps $1,500 a month after taxes. Then there was her designer purse, her shoes, her sunglasses, her perfectly manicured nails. None of it added up. But I said nothing. How could I? Asking about money felt invasive, accusatory, and I didn't want to pick a fight. So I smiled and continued serving dinner like a good hostess. After we finished, Eddie helped me carry plates to the kitchen. Just the two of us for a moment. It felt like old times. Thanks for dinner, Mom, he said softly. It was really great. You're always welcome here, I said, touching his arm. You know that, right? He nodded, avoiding my direct gaze. I know. There was a sadness in his voice, as if he wanted to say more but couldn't. Before I could ask, Morin called from the living room, Eddie, come here for a second. He tensed, then gave me a quick smile and walked back out. I stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, listening to their muffled voices. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough. Morin's voice, low and insistent. This place could sell for so much. We could finally stop renting. You know we need this. Eddie mumbled something inaudible. Then Morin again, louder this time. She doesn't need all this space. She's one person, Eddie. One person. And we're struggling. My hand froze. The water ran over the plate, but I felt nothing. We need this. Not, maybe she'd be happier downsizing. Not, it might be easier for her. Just, we need this. They weren't considering my well-being. They were calculating what they could take. I turned off the water, gripping the edge of the sink, staring out the window into the backyard. The same backyard where Ray and I drank coffee on Sunday mornings, where Eddie learned to ride his bike, the home we'd spent 30 years filling with love, laughter, and the small, ordinary moments that make life worth living. Now, my son's wife was in my living room, calculating its value as if it were nothing more than a transaction. I dried my hands slowly, took a deep breath, then walked back into the living room with a smile. Anyone want dessert? I asked brightly. I made peach cobbler. Morin glanced at her phone. Actually, we should get going. Early morning tomorrow. Eddie nodded quickly, relieved to have an excuse. They gathered their things. Morin gave me a brief, obligatory hug. Eddie hugged me a little longer, but it still felt distant. Thanks again, Mom, he said. Anytime, sweetheart. I stood at the door watching them walk to their car. Morin was already on her phone before she even got in. Eddie looked back once, just once, and gave me a small wave. Then they drove away. I closed the door and leaned against it. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I walked back into the dining room and looked at the table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, evidence that people had been here, but it felt emptier now than before they came. I sat in Ray's old chair, staring at the wall. Morin's words echoed in my mind, we need this. And Eddie had said nothing to defend me, nothing to stop her. That's when I confronted something I'd been avoiding for months. My son wasn't the same person anymore. And the woman he married wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted. 3 weeks passed before I saw them again. 3 weeks of silence. No calls, no texts. I tried reaching out twice. Once to ask how Eddie was doing, once to invite them for Sunday brunch. Both times he replied with the same excuse. Busy right now, Mom. Maybe next month. Maybe next month. As if his mother was something to pencil in when he had nothing better to do. I stopped trying after that. Pride has a way of protecting you when love becomes too painful. Then, out of the blue, Eddie called. Hey, Mom. Morin and I are thinking of having a little cookout at our place this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just burgers and hanging out. You should come. I was so surprised I almost dropped the phone. Really? He sounded like himself again for a moment. I know it's been a while. Thought it'd be nice. My heart lifted despite everything. The coldness, Morin's calculating comments, weeks of being ignored. Because he was my son. And when your child reaches out, you grasp it, you hope. I'd love to, I said. Great. Saturday around 2. I'll be there. When I hung up, I stood in the kitchen, smiling foolishly. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe things were improving. Maybe Morin was warming to me. Mothers are experts at self-deception when the truth is too painful. Saturday arrived. I bought a store-made potato salad and a bottle of wine. I wore a nice blouse, even put on a little makeup. Their apartment was small, a 2-bedroom rental in a complex near the highway, the kind of place young couples live while saving for something better. Eddie greeted me at the door with a genuine smile. Hey Mom. Come on in. The apartment smelled of charcoal and grilled meat. Morin was inside, setting paper plates on a folding table. She glanced up as I entered. Oh hey Ruth. Not warm, not cold, just neutral. Hi Morin. I brought potato salad. Great. You can put it in the fridge. Eddie took the bowl and walked it to the kitchen. I followed, looking around. The apartment was neat but sparse. Minimal furniture, a small television, a thrift store couch. But what truly caught my eye was a shopping bag on the counter. I could see the edge of a designer shoebox inside. Another one. Eddie noticed my gaze and quickly moved the bag. So, you want something to drink, Mom? I have iced tea. That sounds perfect. We moved to the small balcony where Eddie had set up a tiny grill. It overlooked the parking lot, but he'd tried to make it nice. A couple of folding chairs, a string of lights. For a little while it felt normal. Eddie flipped burgers. I asked about work. He talked about a project he was managing. He laughed at something I said. It was the most relaxed I'd felt around him in months. Morin remained inside on her phone as usual. Then she stepped out onto the balcony, still scrolling. I'm going to take this call real quick, she said without looking up. Eddie nodded. Sure. She walked down the stairs toward a small patch of grass near the fence separating their complex from the next. Eddie and I continued talking. He told me about a coworker who reminded him of his father, the way the man organized his desk, his terrible jokes that somehow made people laugh. It was the first time Eddie had mentioned Ray in months. I smiled, though my throat tightened. Your dad would have liked him, I said softly. Eddie nodded. Yeah, he would have. Then I heard it. Morin's voice. She stood by the fence, her back to us, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but the wind carried it just enough. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just give me time. I froze. Eddie was focused on the grill, oblivious. Morin continued, once the house sells, everything will fall into place. I just need him to convince her. My stomach plummeted. I tried to keep my face neutral, picking up my iced tea, though my hands trembled. Morin laughed softly into the phone. Trust me, she won't see it coming. Eddie flipped a burger and glanced at her. She okay? He asked me absently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Morin said a few more words I couldn't decipher, then ended the call. She turned, walked back up the stairs, and slipped her phone into her pocket as if nothing had happened. Everything good? Eddie asked. Yeah, just work stuff, she said smoothly. She sat in the chair beside me and smiled, that same tight smile I'd seen at my house. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see my son's wife. I didn't see someone trying to adjust to a new family. I saw someone with a plan. The rest of the cookout passed in a blur. I don't recall what we talked about or what the food tasted like. All I could hear was her voice. Once the house sells, everything will fall into place. Not if, but once, as if it were a foregone conclusion. When it was time to leave, Eddie walked me to my car. Thanks for coming, Mom, he said. It was really good to see you. I hugged him tight, tighter than usual. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too. I got in my car and drove home in silence, my mind racing. Who was she talking to? What did she mean, he doesn't suspect anything? Was she talking about Eddie? Was there someone else? In the house. My house. She was already planning its sale, already dividing money that wasn't hers, already treating my home as a done deal. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the front door. The house Ray and I saved for, the house we painted together, the house where we raised our son. She wanted it and she was using Eddie to get it. But worse, something else was happening. Something Eddie knew nothing about. Something she was hiding. I needed the truth. Not guesses, not suspicions. The truth. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Janice's number. She answered on the second ring. Ruth, everything okay? No, I said quietly. I need your help. Pause. Come over, she said. Right now. I started the car and backed out of the driveway. I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done waiting for things to improve on their own. If my son was being manipulated, if my home was targeted, if secrets were being kept, I needed to know and I would find out. Janice lived 10 minutes away in a small yellow house with a garden always more vibrant than mine. She'd been my friend since Eddie was in diapers. She was there when Ray proposed, when Eddie was born, when Ray died. If anyone would understand, it was her. She opened the door before I even knocked. Come in, she said, stepping aside. I walked into her living room and sat on the couch, where I'd sat 100 times before, but this time felt different, heavier. Janice poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and handed me one. Then she sat across from me and waited. I told her everything. The calls that stopped, the dinner where Morin suggested I sell my house, the cookout where I overheard her plan, the expensive things she kept buying, the way Eddie had changed. When I finished, Janice was silent for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and took my hand. "Ruth," she said gently, "this isn't something you guess about. You need the truth. Not suspicions, not assumptions. The truth." "But how?" I asked. "I can't just accuse her without proof. Eddie would never forgive me." Janice nodded slowly. "I know someone," she said. "A retired police officer. He does private investigation work now. Quietly. Professionally. If something's going on, he'll find it." My stomach clenched. "You mean hire someone to follow her?" "I mean find out if your instincts are right," Janice said firmly. "Because if they are, Eddie is in danger. Not physical danger, but the kind that ruins lives, financial, emotional. And you can't protect him if you don't know what you're protecting him from." I stared down at my tea. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just a paranoid old woman who can't let go of her son? Janice squeezed my hand. "Then you'll know that too and you can let it go. But Ruth, I've known you for 40 years. You're not paranoid. You're careful and your instincts have never been wrong." I looked up at her. "What's his name?" "Mr. Patel," she said. "He helped my cousin last year when she thought her business partner was stealing. Turned out she was right. Patel found everything quietly, no drama, just facts." She wrote his number on a piece of paper and handed it to me. I stared at it for a long time. Hiring someone to investigate my own family felt like a betrayal, like admitting love wasn't enough, that trust had limits. But then I remembered Morin's voice near the fence. "Once the house sells, everything will fall into place." I thought about the expensive jewelry, the designer bags, the way she looked at my home as if it were already hers. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. "Thank you," I said quietly. Janice walked me to the door and hugged me tightly. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. The next morning I called Mr. Patel. His office was small, tucked above a tax preparation service in old downtown Naples. The stairs creaked as I climbed them. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. When I knocked, a calm voice said, "Come in." Mr. Patel was older than I expected, perhaps 65, with glasses and a kind face. The kind of man you'd trust to tell you the truth even when it hurt. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Mrs. Dawson?" "Yes, Janice told me you might call. Please sit." I sat down, hands clasped in my lap, unsure where to begin. He waited patiently. Finally I spoke. "I think my daughter-in-law is planning something. Something involving my house and possibly someone else. I don't have proof, just a feeling and one conversation I wasn't supposed to hear." I told him everything, the same story I'd told Janice. He listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he set his pen down and looked at me. "Mrs. Dawson," he said gently, "what you're describing sounds like a pattern. The expensive items, the pressure to sell your home, the private phone calls, these aren't random. They suggest intent. So you think I'm right?" "I think you deserve the truth," he said, "and I can help you find it. But I need to be honest about something." I nodded. "If I look into this, I may find things you don't want to see. Things about your daughter-in-law, perhaps even about your son. The truth doesn't always feel good." My throat tightened. "I understand." He leaned back. "I'll need 2 weeks, maybe less. I'll follow her, document her activities, look into her finances if possible, see who she's meeting with. Then I'll bring you everything I find." "How much will this cost?" He named a price. It was more than I wanted to spend, but less than losing my home, less than watching my son be used. "Okay," I said. He nodded, stood, and extended his hand. "I'll be in touch soon." I shook his hand and left. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I tried to keep busy, cleaning the house unnecessarily, baking bread I didn't eat, organizing already organized closets. Every time my phone rang, my heart leaped, but it was never him, just telemarketers' spam calls. Eddie texted me once, "Hey Mom, hope you're doing okay. We'll try to visit soon." "We'll try." Not "we miss you." Not "we want to see you." "We'll try." I stared at that message for a long time before replying, "Looking forward to it, sweetheart." I heard nothing back. At night, I lay awake, imagining what Patel might uncover. Part of me hoped he'd find nothing, that Morin was merely materialistic, the phone call harmless, that I was overreacting. But another part, the part silenced by doubt and guilt for months, knew better. Mothers sense danger around their children like animals sense storms. And I'd been sensing this storm for a long time. On the 14th day my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Dawson, this is Mr. Patel." My hand tightened around the phone. "Yes." "I have what you asked for," he said quietly. "You should come by." My heart sank. "Did you find something?" Pause. "Yes," he said. "I think it's better if we talk in person." I closed my eyes. "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. For 2 weeks, I'd convinced myself I might be wrong, that this was all in my head, that I was just a lonely widow seeing problems where none existed. But Patel's tone told me everything. He'd found something and it was bad. I slowly rose, grabbed my purse and walked to my car. The drive to his office felt interminable. Every red light seemed to last an eternity. When I finally climbed those creaky stairs again and knocked, he opened the door immediately, his face serious. "Come in, Mrs. Dawson." I walked inside and sat in the same chair as 2 weeks prior. Patel sat across from me and placed a thick manila folder on the desk. He looked at me for a long moment. "Before I open this," he said gently, "I want you to know that what you're about to see is going to hurt. But you asked for the truth and you deserve it." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He slowly opened the folder, then spoke words I'll never forget. "You should brace yourself." The first thing Mr. Patel pulled from the folder was a photograph. He slid it across the desk without a word. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was Maureen, smiling, outside a restaurant I didn't recognize, wearing a dress I'd never seen. But she wasn't alone. A tall, well-dressed man stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a way that was far too familiar, too comfortable. I stared at the photo, trying to comprehend it. "Who is this?" I asked quietly. "His name is David Brennan," Patel said. "He owns a commercial real estate firm in Fort Myers." I looked up at him. "Real estate?" Patel nodded slowly. He pulled out another photograph, Maureen and the same man entering a sleek black car, his hand on her waist again. She was laughing. Another photo, the two of them entering a hotel. My stomach churned. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "At least 4 months, Patel said. "Maybe longer." I followed her on 3 separate occasions. Each time she met with him, lunch, dinner, hotels. He paused. "Mrs. Dawson, I need to show you something else." He pulled out a stack of printed pages, receipts, bank statements, credit card bills. "Maureen has been spending money well beyond what her income should allow," he explained. "The boutique where she works pays about $12 an hour. She works part-time. That's maybe $1,500 a month after taxes." He pointed to a receipt. "This bracelet she bought 2 weeks ago, $3,000 paid in cash." Another receipt. "This purse, $2,200. Also cash." He spread the papers. "In the last 6 months she has spent close to $30,000 on luxury items. None of it traceable to credit cards in her name. All cash purchases." I stared at the numbers. "Where is she getting the money?" Patel's expression darkened. "That's where it gets worse." He pulled out another document, an email printed and highlighted. I was able to access some communication between Maureen and Mr. Brennan through a contact I have. "This email was sent 3 weeks ago." He handed it to me. I read it slowly, the words blurring at first. I had to blink several times to focus. It was from Maureen to David. The subject line read, "Timeline update." I kept reading. "Eddie is finally coming around. I've been working on him for months about the house. He's starting to see it my way. His mother doesn't need that much space. Once I convince him to talk her into selling, we can move forward. The property is worth at least $600,000, maybe more depending on the market. Eddie will inherit it eventually, but we don't have time to wait for that. I need him to push her to sell now while she's still healthy and can be persuaded. Once the sale goes through, Eddie and I will have enough for a decent down payment on our own place. That should keep him happy and distracted for a while. After the divorce is finalized, you and I can move forward without any complications. He still doesn't suspect anything. Just keep being patient. This will all be worth it. I read it 3 times. Each time the word struck harder. After the divorce is finalized, he still doesn't suspect anything. Once the sale goes through, my hand began shaking so badly I had to set the paper down. "She's planning to leave him," I whispered. Patel nodded. "Yes, but not until after she gets what she wants. The plan seems to be this. Convince Eddie to pressure you into selling your home. Use the proceeds to buy a house together. Then once everything is settled and the money is secure, she files for divorce. In a marriage that short, with joint property involved, she could walk away with a significant amount." I felt sick. "And Eddie has no idea?" "None," Patel said. "From what I can tell, he believes she loves him. He believes they're building a life together. He has no idea she's using him as a stepping stone." I pressed my hand to my mouth. All this time, I thought Maureen was just manipulative, just greedy, just a bad influence. But this was so much worse. She wasn't just after my house. She wasn't just pressuring Eddie. She was destroying him, using his trust, his love, his loyalty to his mother as a weapon to get what she wanted. And when she was done, she was going to leave him with nothing. Patel reached across the desk and placed a steady hand near mine. "I know this is hard to hear," he said gently, "but you needed to know. Because if you don't stop this, your son is going to lose everything. His marriage, his money, and possibly his relationship with you if he blames you for not selling when she asked." I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. What kind of person does this? I whispered. Patel's face was kind but firm. The kind who sees people as tools, not as human beings. He gathered the photos and documents back into the folder and closed it. You have options now, Mrs. Dawson. You can show this to Eddie. You can confront Morin. You can protect your assets legally so she never gets what she's after. Or you can do all three. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. I need to protect my home first, I said, before anything else. If she's planning to manipulate Eddie into making me sell, I need to make sure that's not even possible. Patel nodded. Smart. I know a good family attorney, someone who specializes in estate planning and asset protection. I can give you her number. Please. He wrote down a name and number on a small card and handed it to me. Attorney Rebecca Harris. She'll be able to help you set up a trust or other legal protections, Patel said. Make sure your property stays yours no matter what anyone tries. I took the card and slipped it into my purse along with the folder. Thank you, I said quietly, for finding the truth even though it hurts. Patel stood and walked me to the door. Mrs. Dawson, he said as I stepped into the hallway, you are stronger than you think and you are doing the right thing, not just for yourself but for your son too. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I walked down those creaky stairs and out into the sunlight. The world looked the same as it had an hour ago, the same streets, the same sky, the same warmth in the air, but everything had changed. I got into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the folder on the passenger seat. Inside were photographs of betrayal, proof of lies, evidence of a plan designed to destroy my son's life and steal everything my husband and I had worked for. I thought about Eddie, the way he used to look at Morin when they first started dating, like she was the most wonderful thing that had ever happened to him. I thought about the way he defended her, the way he pulled away from me to make her happy. And now I knew why. Because she had been whispering in his ear for months, planting seeds of doubt, making him believe that his mother was the problem, that I was holding them back, that my house was an opportunity, not a home. And he believed her because he loved her and she was using that love like a tool. I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. She wasn't just coming for my son. She was coming for everything. But she made one mistake. She underestimated me. She thought I was just a lonely old widow who would do anything to keep her son happy. She thought I would be easy to manipulate, easy to pressure, easy to break. She was wrong. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. I had work to do. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for someone else to protect me. I was going to protect myself and I was going to protect my son whether he knew he needed it or not. The next morning, I called attorney Rebecca Harris. Her office was downtown, in one of those newer buildings with glass windows and polished floors, the kind of place that exuded professionalism. I needed serious. The receptionist led me to a small conference room where Rebecca was waiting. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Mrs. Dawson, she said, standing to shake my hand, Mr. Patel told me you might be calling. Please have a seat. I sat down and placed the folder Patel had given me on the table. I need to protect my home, I said simply. And I need to make sure no one can pressure me into selling it. Not my son, not his wife, no one. Rebecca nodded, opening a notepad. Tell me what's going on. I told her everything, the whole story. Morin's manipulation, the affair, the plan to use Eddie to convince me to sell, the emails outlining her timeline. Rebecca listened without interruption. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Mrs. Dawson, you have more control than you realize, she said, and we can ensure it stays that way. She explained it in terms I could understand. A living trust. It would allow me to maintain complete control of my property during my lifetime. No one could force me to sell. No one could take it from me. And upon my eventual passing, the house would transfer according to my wishes, not someone else's demands. We can also add conditions, Rebecca said. For example, if you want to ensure your son inherits the property, we can include a clause that protects it from being claimed by a spouse in a divorce. We can also specify that if anyone has attempted to manipulate or pressure you into selling, they are excluded from inheritance entirely. I stared at her. You can do that? Absolutely. It's your property, Mrs. Dawson. You get to decide what happens to it. Not your son, not his wife. You. For the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Power. Not over other people, but over my own life, my own choices. I want that, I said firmly. All of it. Rebecca smiled. Good. I'll draft the documents. You'll need to sign them in front of a notary, and I'll ensure everything is filed properly. Once it's done, your home is permanently protected. She paused. But I have to ask, what are you planning to do about your son? Are you going to tell him what you found? I considered that for a long moment. Yes, I said quietly. But not yet. Not until I'm ready. Not until he can see the truth with his own eyes. Rebecca nodded slowly. Just be careful. Confrontations like this can go badly if not handled right. People don't always react the way you hope. I know, I said. But he deserves to know. Even if it destroys him, because if I don't tell him, she will destroy him anyway. Rebecca reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. You're doing the right thing, she said gently. For yourself and for him. 3 days later, I returned to her office to sign the papers. The documents were thick, full of legal language I only half understood. But Rebecca walked me through every page, every clause, every protection. When I signed my name at the bottom, I felt something shift inside me. Strength. The house was fully, legally, irrevocably mine. Maureen could scheme all she wanted. She could whisper in Eddie's ear. She could plan and manipulate and lie. But she would never get my home. I walked out of that office with my head held higher than it had been in months. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Patel's folders spread out. Photographs, receipts, emails, bank statements, evidence of betrayal, proof of lies. I studied every detail, memorized the timeline, and read the emails until I could recite them. Then I began planning. I thought about Eddie, the son I raised, the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the teenager who brought me flowers on Mother's Day, even penniless, the young man who cried at his father's funeral and promised to always take care of me. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under Maureen's manipulation, confused by her lies, blinded by love. But he was still there and I was going to bring him back. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with truth. I needed him to see what I had seen, to feel the betrayal I had felt, to understand that the woman he loved was using him as a tool to steal from his own mother. But I also needed to be smart. If I simply showed him the folder and said, "Look what your wife is doing," he would defend her. He would make excuses. He would accuse me of jealousy, control, or an inability to let go. That's what people do when the truth is too painful. They reject it, protecting the lie because it feels safer. So I needed a moment. A moment where he couldn't deny what was right in front of him. A moment where the truth was undeniable. I thought about holidays, family traditions, times when people let their guard down and show their true selves. And then it came to me, Christmas Eve. I pulled out my calendar and counted the weeks. 2 months. I had 2 months to prepare, to ensure everything was in place, to plan the one night that would change everything. I reached for a pen and paper. I started writing a guest list. Just Eddie and Maureen. A menu, Eddie's favorite foods, the meal I made when he was a boy, the same dinner Ray would enjoy. Gifts, I thought carefully about this. What would mean something to Eddie? What would show him I still loved him even after everything? A car. He'd been talking about wanting a nicer vehicle for months. I'd been saving, not out of obligation, but because love doesn't stop just because it's been hurt. And for Maureen, a designer handbag. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed her to feel safe, comfortable, unsuspecting. I wanted her to think she had won. I wanted her to believe I was just a foolish old woman showering them with gifts, desperate for their approval. And then, when she was most confident, when she thought the night was unfolding exactly as planned, I would present the truth. Not with shouting, not with tears, just facts. Photographs, emails, receipts. Let the evidence speak for itself. I folded the paper and set it aside. Then I pulled a large manila envelope from the drawer, the kind with a metal clasp. Slowly, carefully, I placed every piece of evidence inside. The photos of Maureen with David, the receipts showing cash purchases, the printed emails outlining her plan, the bank statements, all of it. I sealed the envelope and wrote Eddie's name on the front in neat handwriting. Then I placed it in the drawer of the table beside my favorite chair in the living room. The same chair where I would sit on Christmas Eve. The same chair where I would hand my son the truth. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Part of me wanted to call Eddie right then, to warn him, to beg him to see what was happening before it was too late. But I knew that wouldn't work. He had to see it himself. He had to feel the weight of betrayal in his own hands. I closed the drawer and stood up. 2 months. I could wait 2 months. I had waited this long already. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The sun was setting, the sky turning pink and orange as it always did in Florida. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel weak. I felt ready. Maureen thought she was playing a game. She thought she had all the pieces in place. She thought she was 10 steps ahead. But she forgot something. Mothers don't give up on their children. Not when they're in danger. Not when they're being used. Not when they're being destroyed by someone who doesn't truly love them. I turned away from the window and whispered to the empty room, Christmas Eve. The weeks passed slowly. November came and went. The weather cooled slightly, though in Florida, that just meant you could walk outside without feeling like you were stepping into an oven. I spent those weeks preparing, not just for Christmas Eve but for everything that would come after. I contacted a dealership about a used BMW. Something reliable, something Eddie would love. The salesman showed me a few options and I chose one that was 3 years old but looked brand new. Clean interior, low mileage, the kind of car a young man starting his career would be proud to drive. I paid for it in full. No financing, no loans. It sat in the dealership lot with my name on the paperwork waiting for Christmas Eve. I also went to the designer store downtown, the one where women with more money than sense spent hours browsing handbags that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. The saleswoman approached me with a polite smile. Can I help you find something? I need a handbag, I said. Something expensive, something that would impress a young woman who likes luxury. She showed me several options. I chose one that looked elegant but understated, the kind Morin would want to show off in photos. I paid for it the same way I paid for the car, in full. No hesitation. The saleswoman wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and placed it in a branded bag. Lucky recipient, she said with a smile. I nodded but didn't smile back. Lucky was not the word I would use. By early December, I was ready to send the invitation. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone, staring at Eddie's name in my contacts. I could have just called, but a text felt safer, less likely to lead to questions I wasn't ready to answer. I typed carefully, "Hi, sweetheart. I'd love to have you and Morin over for Christmas Eve dinner. It's been too long since we spent the holidays together. Let me know if you can make it. Love, Mom." I hit send before I could overthink it. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't Eddie who replied. It was Morin. "Hi, Ruth. That sounds great. We'll be there. Also, I've been meaning to talk to you about the house situation. Christmas Eve would be a perfect time to discuss it. See you then." I stared at the message. She couldn't help herself. Even in response to a simple dinner invitation, she had to bring up the house. She had to remind me that she had an agenda, that this wasn't just a family gathering for her. It was an opportunity. I set the phone down and took a deep breath. She thought she was walking into a negotiation, a chance to finally convince me to sell. A moment where she could push Eddie to pressure me in person face to face until I gave in. She had no idea what she was really walking into. Eddie texted an hour later, "Thanks, Mom. Looking forward to it." Short, polite, distant, but he was coming. That was all that mattered. The days leading up to Christmas Eve were strange. I cleaned the house, though it was already spotless. I decorated the tree with the same ornaments Ray and I had used for decades. I hung wreaths on the windows. I set out the nativity scene Ray's mother had given us when we first married. Everything looked festive, warm, inviting, but underneath the surface I was preparing for war. Not the loud kind, not with shouting and broken dishes, but the quiet kind, fought with truth, documents, and evidence that couldn't be argued away. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would stay calm, how I would present the envelope without emotion, without anger, without giving Morin any opportunity to twist the narrative. I would let the facts speak for themselves. 3 days before Christmas, I picked up the BMW from the dealership. They detailed it for me, tied a big red bow on the hood. I drove it home carefully and parked it in my garage, hidden from view. Eddie wouldn't see it until Christmas Eve. I also wrapped Morin's handbag, expensive paper, a silk ribbon. I made it look like I had put thought into it, like I cared, because I needed her to believe I was still trying to win her approval. The night before Christmas Eve, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if Eddie didn't believe me? What if he thought I had fabricated the evidence? What if he chose Morin over the truth? What if he walked out and never spoke to me again? The thoughts circled in my mind like vultures. But then I considered the alternative. If I did nothing, Morin would continue manipulating him. She would pressure him into convincing me to sell my home. She would take the money, file for divorce, and leave him devastated and broke. And he would never know that I could have stopped it, that I had the truth in my hands and chose to stay silent. I couldn't live with that. Whatever happened tomorrow, at least Eddie would know. At least he would have the chance to see who Morin really was. What he did with that information was up to him. But I would not let him walk blindly into destruction. I got out of bed and walked to the living room. I opened the drawer where I had placed the envelope weeks ago. It was still there, sealed, heavy with the weight of truth. I picked it up and held it for a moment. Then I carried it to my bedroom and set it on the nightstand beside my bed. Tomorrow I would place it in the drawer next to my chair in the living room where it would wait, hidden, ready. I climbed back into bed and closed my eyes. And for the first time in months, I fell asleep without anxiety twisting in my chest, because I was no longer waiting for something terrible to happen. I was ready for it. Christmas Eve morning arrived with clear skies and warm air. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on the back porch watching the sun rise over the neighbor's fence. The world felt quiet, peaceful. I thought about Ray, about what he would say if he were here. He would probably tell me I was doing the right thing, that protecting Eddie meant telling him the truth even when it hurt. Ray never liked liars. He had no patience for manipulation or deceit. He would have hated Morin. I finished my coffee and went inside. There was work to do. I spent the morning cooking. Roast turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, cornbread, green beans with bacon, cranberry sauce, all of Eddie's favorites. The house filled with the smell of home, the kind of smells that make you feel safe, loved. I set the table with the good china, the silverware Ray and I received as a wedding gift, the cloth napkins I only used on special occasions. Everything looked perfect. I placed the wrapped handbag under the tree. I put the small box with the car keys beside it. Then I walked to my bedroom and picked up the envelope. I carried it to the living room and placed it in the drawer beside my chair. Out of sight, waiting. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed drawer. Tonight, everything would change. Either Eddie would see the truth and choose to protect himself, or he would reject it and choose Morin. Either way I would know. And I would finally stop living in this painful limbo of watching my son be destroyed and being powerless to stop it. I took a deep breath. Then I went to the kitchen to finish preparing dinner. It was almost time. They arrived at 6 sharp. I heard the car pull into the driveway and took a deep breath before opening the door. Eddie stood on the porch holding a bottle of wine. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, the kind of smile you give when you're not sure what to expect. "Hey Mom, Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I hugged him tightly. He hugged back, but only for a moment before stepping away. Morin walked up behind him, scrolling on her phone. She glanced up briefly. "Hi Ruth. Something smells good." "Thank you. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." They stepped inside. Eddie looked around at the decorations, the tree, the table set with china. "Wow Mom, you really went all out." "I wanted it to be special," I said softly. Morin wandered into the living room, her eyes scanning everything. The furniture, the walls, the windows. She was doing it again, assessing, calculating. I watched her for a moment, then turned back to Eddie. "Would you like something to drink before dinner?" "Sure, I'll take some water." We walked to the kitchen together. Just the two of us. For a brief second it felt normal. "How have you been, Mom?" he asked. "Good," I said, pouring him a glass. "Busy getting ready for tonight." He nodded, but his mind seemed somewhere else. "And you?" I asked. "How's work?" "Fine. Busy. You know how it is." He took the glass and drank without looking at me. I wanted to reach out to touch his arm to tell him everything right then and there, but I held back. "Not yet." Morin appeared in the doorway. "Eddie, come look at this." He glanced at me, then walked out of the kitchen. I stood there alone, gripping the edge of the counter. Dinner was tense. We sat at the table with plates full of food, but the conversation felt forced, hollow. Eddie talked about work. I asked polite questions. Morin said almost nothing. She picked at her turkey, scrolled through her phone between bites, and checked her watch twice as if she had somewhere better to be. I tried to ignore it. I focused on Eddie, on the way he ate the mashed potatoes the same way he had as a child, mixing in too much butter. For a moment I allowed myself to remember the boy he used to be. The boy who laughed at my terrible jokes, who helped me carry groceries without being asked, who told me I was the best cook in the world even when I burned the roast. That boy was still in there. I had to believe that. After dinner we moved to the living room. The tree lights blinked softly. The room felt warm, almost peaceful, but my heart was pounding. "Should we do gifts?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Eddie nodded. "Sure." I reached under the tree and pulled out the small box first, the one with the car keys inside. I handed it to Eddie. "This is for you, sweetheart." He looked surprised. "Mom, you didn't have to get me anything." "I wanted to." He opened the box slowly. When he saw the keys his face went blank. Then his eyes widened. "Mom, are these?" "Go look in the garage," I said quietly. He stood, holding the keys like they might disappear if he moved too fast. He walked to the side door that led to the garage and opened it. I heard his breath catch. "Mom, a BMW?" He turned to look at me, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," I said. "But I wanted to. You work hard. You deserve something nice." He walked back into the living room and hugged me, a real hug this time, the kind that reminded me why I was doing all of this. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He pulled back, his eyes glistening slightly. Morin was still sitting on the couch, watching with an unreadable expression. I picked up the second gift, the designer handbag. "And this is for you, Morin." She took it without standing, opened it carefully, and lifted the bag out of the tissue paper. For a second her eyes lit up. She turned it over in her hands, examining the brand label. Then she pulled out her phone and took a quick photo of herself holding it. "Cute," she said flatly. She set the bag down on the couch beside her like it was a throw pillow. "No thank you, no appreciation, just a dismissive acknowledgement." Eddie frowned slightly but said nothing. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and preparing for. Eddie cleared his throat. "Mom, about your gift." I looked at him. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "We didn't get you anything this year." The words hung in the air. I blinked. My chest tightened. "Oh," I said softly. Eddie tried to laugh it off. "Yeah," Morin said. "Well, she said you need to learn to give without expecting anything back. You know, like generosity shouldn't come with strings attached." He was trying to make it sound reasonable, philosophical even, but the words landed like stones. I looked at Morin. She was leaning back against the couch, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile on her face. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, but proud. Eddie kept talking, his voice growing quieter. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just Morin thinks it's important that we all learn to be less materialistic, especially around the holidays." He gestured vaguely at the gifts I had given them. "You've been so generous and we appreciate it. We really do, but we thought maybe this year you could just enjoy giving without needing something in return." His voice trailed off. Morin's smile widened just slightly. She thought she had won. She thought this moment, this humiliation would break me, would make me desperate for their approval, would make me willing to do anything to get back into their good graces, including selling my house. I sat very still. The room felt smaller. The lights too bright. The warmth I had worked so hard to create felt hollow. But I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not react the way she expected. Instead, I felt that same clarity I had felt months ago, the same strength I had felt when I signed the legal documents protecting my home. I reached into the drawer beside my chair. My hand did not shake. I pulled out the envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with the truth inside. I placed it on the coffee table between us. Eddie looked confused. Morin's smile faded just slightly. "Well," I said quietly, my voice steady, "if tonight is about lessons, then let me teach you something." I looked directly at Morin. "Go on," I said. "Open it." Eddie glanced at Morin, then at the envelope. Morin leaned forward slowly. Her fingers hesitated for just a moment before she picked it up. She unsealed the metal clasp and pulled out the first photograph. The color drained from her face. Eddie leaned closer, frowning. "What is that?" Morin tried to shove the photo back into the envelope, but Eddie grabbed her wrist. "Let me see." He pulled the envelope toward him and dumped the contents onto the table. Photographs scattered across the surface. Receipts, printed emails, bank statements. Eddie picked up one of the photos. His hand started to shake. It was Morin with another man, his hand on her waist, her smiling up at him. Eddie's face went pale. What is this?" His voice cracked. He picked up another photo, then another. Then he saw the email, the one where Morin outlined her plan, the timeline, the divorce, the house. He read it slowly, his lips moving slightly as he processed each word. When he finished, he looked up at Morin. "Tell me this isn't real." Morin opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Eddie, it's not what it looks like. Your mother, is trying to turn you against me. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." Eddie's hands were trembling now. "Then explain the photos. Explain the emails. Explain this." He held up a receipt for the bracelet she had been wearing for weeks. $3,000, Morin? Where did you get $3,000? She stammered, tried to form an excuse, but nothing made sense. Eddie stood up, the papers still clutched in his hands. His face was a mixture of shock, anger, and heartbreak. "You were going to leave me," he whispered. "After you got the money from my mom's house. You were going to leave me." Morin's face twisted. "Your mother was holding us back," she snapped. "We needed that house, Eddie. We deserved it. And she was being selfish." The mask slipped. The sweet, loving wife disappeared. What stood in front of us now was someone cold, calculating, desperate. Eddie took a step back. "Get out." Morin blinked. "What?" "Get out." His voice was low, controlled, but shaking with rage. "Eddie, please just listen." "No," he shouted. "Get out of my mother's house. Now." Morin stood frozen for a moment. Then, with a burst of fury, she grabbed her purse and the designer handbag I had given her. "Fine. You'll regret this, Eddie. You'll regret choosing her over me." She stormed toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She slammed it so hard the ornaments on the tree rattled. And then she was gone. The silence after Morin left was deafening. Eddie stood in the middle of the living room, still holding the photographs in his trembling hands. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the couch, covering his face with his hands, and he broke, shaking sobs that came from somewhere I hadn't heard in years, not since Ray's funeral, not since the day we buried the man who had raised him to be better than this. I moved slowly toward him and sat down beside him. I didn't say anything at first. I just placed my hand gently on his shoulder. He flinched, then leaned into me, burying his face against my shoulder the way he used to when he was small and the world felt too big. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he choked out between sobs. "I'm so sorry." "Shoo," I whispered. "It's okay." "It's not okay," he said, pulling back to look at me. His eyes were red, filled with tears and shame. I let her say those things to you. I stood there and watched her treat you like you were nothing. I believed her when she said you were being selfish. I actually believed her." His voice cracked. "And tonight what I said to you about not getting you a gift, about you needing to learn a lesson." He shook his head, unable to finish. "Eddie," I said gently, taking his hand in mine. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not a flaw. That's being human." "But I should have seen it," he said desperately. "I should have known. The expensive things. The way she talked about your house. The way she kept pulling me away from you." He wiped his eyes roughly. "How could I have been so blind?" I squeezed his hand. "Because love makes us blind sometimes. It makes us want to believe the best in people even when the signs are there. And she was very good at what she did. She manipulated you slowly, carefully. You didn't stand a chance." Eddie looked down at the photographs scattered across the table. "How long have you known?" "Since September," I said quietly. "I overheard her on the phone at your cookout. talking about a plan about the house. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how deep it went. So, I hired someone to find out. He looked at me stunned. You hired an investigator? I nodded. I had to know the truth. Not for me, for you. Because I could see what she was doing to you. I could see you pulling away, changing, and I knew that if I didn't stop it, she was going to destroy you. Eddie's face crumpled again. I almost let her, he whispered. I almost convinced you to sell this house. She kept saying we needed it, that it was the only way we could move forward, and I was starting to believe her. He looked around the living room, at the tree, at the photos of Ray on the wall, at the home his parents had built. I almost took this away from you. But you didn't, I said firmly. And that's what matters. He shook his head. Only because you stopped me. If you hadn't found out, if you hadn't showed me tonight. His voice broke. I would have lost everything, the house, you, my self-respect. Everything. I pulled him close again. You haven't lost me, I said softly. You will never lose me. I'm your mother. That doesn't change no matter what. We sat like that for a long time. The tree lights blinked softly. The house was quiet except for the sound of Eddie's breathing as he tried to calm down. Finally, he pulled back and wiped his eyes. What do I do now? He asked. About Maureen? About everything? I took a deep breath. You protect yourself. Legally, financially, emotionally. You talk to a lawyer. You make sure she can't take anything from you, and then you start rebuilding your life. Eddie nodded slowly, absorbing it all. And you? He said, looking at me. The house. Did you do anything to protect it? I smiled faintly. I set up a living trust. The house is legally protected. No one can force me to sell it. And when I'm gone, it will go to you with conditions that protect it from anyone who tried to manipulate me. Eddie let out a shaky breath. You thought of everything. I had to, I said simply, because I knew you couldn't see what was happening, and I wasn't going to let her take everything your father and I worked for. He reached over and hugged me again, tight, desperate. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I love you too, sweetheart. And you're going to be okay. It's going to hurt for a while, but you're going to be okay. He nodded against my shoulder. We sat there together as the night grew late. The food sat untouched on the table. The gifts remained under the tree. But for the first time in months, I had my son back. Not the version Maureen had shaped him into. Not the distant, cold stranger who avoided my calls. The real Eddie, the boy I raised, the man his father would have been proud of. Eventually, Eddie stood up. I should go, he said quietly. I need to figure out where I'm staying tonight. I can't go back to the apartment. You'll stay here, I said firmly. In your old room for as long as you need. His eyes filled with tears again. Thank you. I walked him upstairs and showed him to the guest room, the same room he had slept in as a teenager. I had kept it the same all these years just in case. Get some rest, I said. We'll figure everything out tomorrow. He nodded and closed the door. I walked back downstairs and stood in the living room looking at the mess on the coffee table, the photographs, the emails, the evidence of betrayal. I gathered it all up slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the fireplace and stared at the flames I had lit earlier. Part of me wanted to burn it all, to destroy the evidence and pretend none of it had ever happened. But I didn't because Eddie might need it for the divorce, for the lawyers, for proof of what she had done. I set the envelope aside and sat down in my chair. The house was quiet now, peaceful. Christmas Eve hadn't given me joy. It hadn't given me the warm family gathering I had hoped for. But it had given me something more important. Clarity and my son back. I thought about Maureen, about where she was right now. Probably calling David. Probably already planning her next move. But she had lost. She hadn't gotten the house. She hadn't gotten the money. And she had lost Eddie. All because she underestimated a mother's love. All because she thought I was weak. I smiled faintly and looked at the tree. The ornaments Ray and I had collected over the years blinked softly in the light. We did it, Ray, I whispered. We protected him. I sat there for a long time thinking about everything that had happened. Everything I had learned, that silence is not weakness, that patience is not surrender, that sometimes the people we love need to be protected from their own choices, and that boundaries, even painful ones, are acts of love. I stood up slowly and turned off the tree lights. Then I walked upstairs to bed. Tomorrow Eddie would wake up in his childhood room. He would have to face the reality of everything he had lost. He would have to grieve, rebuild, start over, but he would not do it alone. And he would do it as himself, not as someone else's tool. As I lay in bed, I thought about all of you watching this, all of you who have felt invisible in your own families, all of you who have given everything and received nothing but cruelty in return. I want you to know something. You are not weak for loving people who hurt you. You are not foolish for giving them chances. But you are also not required to destroy yourself to make them comfortable. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect what is yours. You are allowed to walk away from people who use your love as a weapon. Even if those people are your own children, even if it breaks your heart. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no.